So I have made it to Utah. I'm in southern Utah at the weirdest gas station kind of ever. I still remember this place from when I stopped here when I went to Moab a few years ago. It's got like aliens painted everywhere, Twilight Zone, all that kind of stuff. And I'm about 5 hours from meeting Stickerz in Page, where we will car camp tonight before we do like a river float trip tomorrow, and then on Tuesday we'll start backpacking in the Grand Canyon. So it's been a pretty smooth drive so far, and yeah, everything's going well. The plan was to meet Stickerz, a good friend from my 2019 PCT hike near Page, Arizona. We'd hang out, car camp, and have a few adventures around that area before heading south for our main objective, the Grand Canyon. After 10 hours of driving and some minor car mishaps, I arrived to a dispersed camping spot in Glen Canyon National Recreation Area just before sunset. I found Stickerz easily via her directions to just take the easiest route towards Lone Rock. We caught up on her recent adventures around southern Utah and northern Arizona and drank beers as the sun set, briefly discussing our plans for the next day. An array of dashboard lights had distracted me from taking in Glen Canyon Dam when I drove over it the night before, so we decided to visit it again before our raft trip that afternoon. We took the pedestrian walkway over the bridge and marveled at the over 4.9 million cubic yards of concrete holding back the mighty Colorado River. Later, after a 2-mile bus ride down a dark tunnel, we got to view everything from below at the beginning of our 15-mile float from the dam to Lee's Ferry. I couldn't help but think of Edward Abbey and the Monkey Wrench Gang seeing this massive obstruction in person. Our tour guide and boat captain led us through Glen Canyon, describing different geological features, pointing out wildlife habitats, and detailing historical occurrences. We even got to stop at Boaters Beach, where a short walk led to a wall of petroglyphs. After viewing the petroglyphs, Stickerz and I decided to use our remaining time on the beach to go for a quick dip in the frigid waters of the Colorado, while the rest of our tour group looked at us like we'd lost it. Shortly after, we boated around Horseshoe Bend. We could even see specks of people at the infamous viewpoint, thousands of feet above at the top of the canyon walls. We stopped at another beach to kill some time so we didn't arrive at Lee's Ferry prematurely, and Stickerz and I took it as another opportunity for a swim. This time, a few of our fellow tour goers even joined. We saw a wild horse on our way out of the canyon, confirmed by our tour guide to be one of several that live in the area. Oh, to be a wild horse living in Glen Canyon. I think that's the feeling I've been chasing since I started through hiking. We docked the boat at Lee's Ferry and bussed back to Page, where Stickerz and I set up camp at a dispersed spot outside of town. The next morning, we decided to check out Horseshoe Bend from above. The short hike was crowded, but the view was worth the walk. It felt even more interesting knowing we'd floated around the bend the day before. It's rare that you get to see things from both above and below, and I appreciated the perspective. After a few town chores, we began our drive to the south rim. 2-lane highway led us through 3 hours of desolate landscape, occasional rock formations breaking up the monotony of sand and sagebrush. We stopped at various overlooks on our way into the park, including Lipan Point, which is where we would start our descent below the rim the next day. We visited the Bright Angel Trail for sunset and watched what we believed was a California condor soar above the canyon before it was swallowed in darkness. In the morning, we gathered our gear and did various chores to prepare for 4 days below the rim. We stopped at the backcountry office for the water report and the blessing to leave my car at our starting location. After dropping Stickerz' car off at the visitor center, we began the 30-minute drive back to Lipan Point. What would take us 30 minutes to drive along the rim would take us 4 days and 56 miles once below. We are heading down to Tonto Trail from where we parked the car and about to drop into the Grand Canyon for the next 4 days. Let's go! The Tonto Trail, an already notoriously steep and difficult route, had suffered some apparent damage from Arizona's heavy winter, and our steep descent became even more challenging due to loose rock on an eroding, unmaintained path. We lost nearly 1,200 feet in less than a mile, with almost 3,500 feet still to descend. We are less than a mile in. It's been very steep so far, and we stopped for lunch because we found a shady spot, and we've got like maybe 7 more miles, maybe 8. It depends where we camp, I guess, but we should be camping on the Colorado tonight, and should be good. Our descent was marked by layers of ancient rock, notably the Grand Canyon Supergroup, which is a complex collection of ancient sedimentary and igneous rock ranging from 800 million to 1.2 billion years old. I didn't even know this during my descent, but even while walking, I was struck by the geological age of the area we were traversing. I couldn't help but think how our time on Earth was an indiscernible blip in the grand scheme of time when compared to these rocks. Not to mention how relatively insignificant our short time in the canyon was. Long before backpackers began to use this trail, Native people used the route to access the Colorado River, and it's the primary access by foot in the eastern Grand Canyon. My unseasoned winter legs shook uncontrollably for most of the descent, especially with 9 miles worth of water in my pack. So I was grateful when right around golden hour, we finally reached the banks of the Colorado. It's runoff season, so we filled up on silty water and chose a camp spot right by the path to the pit toilet. Oh, how I love the infrastructure of national parks. Suspicious of mice, I set up my tent, and my fears of the rodents were confirmed during dinner, leading me to hang my food and all of my smellables for the night. Good morning. It is day 2 of our trek in the Grand Canyon. Yesterday was really steep and pretty hard on my legs. I was shaking. I'm just not in shape for that right now. We descended like 4,800 feet into the canyon. First less than a mile was like 1,200 feet, so that was pretty rough. And then we camped near Tanner Rapids last night on the Colorado, and today we've got roughly 11 miles. We'll see. Then tomorrow we have like 20, so we might try and go a little farther if we can. First impression of the canyon is even dropping into it, it's still so vast. Like even when you're in like 3 miles in, it didn't look any less grand than it did from the rims. I thought for some reason that like as I got up closer it would feel more, I don't know, like not smaller but different, but nope, just still massive and vast. It feels a little less so because you can see less of it now that we're down at the Colorado, but still just incredible. I was grateful for overcast skies to start the day, meaning we got to escape the infamous Grand Canyon heat, even if only for a few hours. We followed the last remaining bits of the Tanner Trail to the famed Escalante Route, another path below the rim that's rumored to require quite a bit of extra effort. We hiked up and away from the Colorado, our last known access to water until we joined the river again at that evening's proposed campsite. I climbed Docks Hill, looking back at several parties on the river who had beached at the mouth of the dry Cardenas Creek. They shrunk as my breathing grew heavy, but soon I was at the top, enjoying 360-degree views of the canyon and the river below. The rumblings I'd heard about the Escalante route were confirmed as the day went on. The trail was narrow in places, and one misstep could lead to a life-threatening fall. We walked along the edges of dramatic canyon walls, peering over towards the depths of the Colorado. We're a little over 6.5 miles in, and kind of just looking for a good spot to have lunch right now. It's pretty hot, so I want to find some shade and get some food in me. While picking our way through the canyon, along drainages and through dry creek beds, the vastness of it still struck me. Even down there, at its heart, near the source of its creation, it felt so large, and I so small. I'm just a little creature, plucking my way up and over rocks, gathering an imperceptible amount of water from the large stream that carved these walls. I feel so insignificant, and that is a feeling I find can only be accomplished in some of the most beautiful places our planet has to offer. First time in the Grand Canyon that I've actually felt like I'm hiking in a canyon. We took a brief, unexpected stop at the Colorado River, which I was very grateful for as I'd been rationing my water to last until camp. With only a few miles left, we figured it wouldn't be long before we made it. But we were wrong. We hiked back up and away from the river, following the edge of more dramatic cliffs with spectacular views. Eventually, we began to hike back toward the rim and away from the water. We walked along the edges of 75 Mile Creek, another dry bed, and I looked down into its depths, thinking how cool it would be to walk along the bottom instead. Soon my wish came true as we reached the mouth of the creek and discovered the route went down into it and along the creek bed. The descent looked like it would require down climbing, but Stickerz found a way that just required a steep hike. With some light use of our hands, we dropped into the mouth of the creek and began the sandy-bottomed walk through the impressive canyon. Walking along the bottom offered a complete change in scenery from walking above, and I was so grateful we chose a route unknowingly that did both.
It is.
The mouth of the canyon opened up, and we were once again on the shores of the Colorado River. Our navigational challenges and apparent lack of planning for this route were far from over. After following the river for just a short way, we were met with a vertical wall and cairns above eye level. Luckily, the holds were strong and the climbing was relatively straightforward. We continued along the cliff band and were met with more cairns above eye level and more cliff bands to scale. Again, the holds were secure, but trekking poles had to be passed between the two of us, and the exposure was certainly daunting. The river seemed to melt away below us quickly, and although there were ledges wide enough to stand on after every 2 to 3 climbing moves, I was a little apprehensive, since I wasn't fully expecting this kind of technicality. 300 feet above the river and probably 35 feet of ledge hopping later, we reached relatively flat trail. The relief was short-lived as it soon opened up to our descent. A steep, talus-filled gully that to me looked too steep to possibly be the right way. But the only other option was going back or climbing impossible to us walls. Stickerz reassured me that if we just took the next few steps that made the most sense, the path would become apparent. And she was right. The way never looked viable for more than a few steps, but once we took those steps, the next few looked viable. Soon, we were back on the banks of the Colorado, and I was both exhausted and elated. We fought thick camel thorn and tamarisk to make forward progress toward the beach, where we had hallucinated some rafters.
So Stickerz and I both thought we saw a raft around where we were going to camp, and we thought we might get treated to some trail magic from some rafters, but we just got close enough to see it's a rock. Oh my god, it is a big rock. We literally both thought we saw people, so don't know what that says about our mental state, but here we are.
The funny thing is, we actually did end up having company at the beach, just not the large raft we thought we saw. Some pack rafters, who had floated the stretch of river we'd hiked from Tanner Rapids to Hance Rapids, were starting to set up for the evening. They offered their filtered water and the other half of the beach for camping, which we gladly accepted. We fell asleep under the stars, anticipating an early morning to make our planned 20-mile day even a remote possibility. In the morning, we filtered our last water from the murky Colorado, since this would be our last access point. We climbed away from the river, navigating a not always straightforward trail, and already feeling the beginnings of a very hot day. We walked along the levels of the canyon via the Tonto Trail, the most well-maintained trail we'd seen since dropping below the rim. Our water sources broke up the day. First Hance Creek, then Cottonwood, then Grapevine. None looked promising until the moment we came upon them, but each time we were grateful for the cold runoff. The bigger mileage, intense heat, and aching feet led to yet another afternoon of questioning why I make the decisions that I do. It's always the afternoons that get to me. Even in the Grand Canyon, one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen, I have to take the time to practice gratitude. I take time to remind myself that I'm so lucky that places like this even exist, and then I get to walk through them. It helps for a little while, but what really helps is soaking my sun hoodie in the next water source before hiking on for the rest of the afternoon.
It's day 3 in the Grand Canyon, and it's about 4 p.m., and we are about 14 miles in. We thought today was going to be a 22-mile day, which was honestly terrifying. I'm pretty shot from the last couple days. This is pretty rugged terrain. It's been gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, kind of brutal. Couldn't ask for anything more.
As the sun dipped below the canyon walls, I was re-energized. We were heading for a spot on the topos that looked like it might be flat enough to camp on, and everything was tinted pink. When I caught Stickerz at the aforementioned flat spot, it was better than we could have ever anticipated. A perfectly flat plateau with 360-degree canyon views. A once-in-a-lifetime kind of cowboy camping spot that eliminated any question as to whether we were hiking on. At 20 miles for the day, I was more than happy to stop there and take it all in. Knowing we had at least 15 miles to hike, including the climb out of the canyon, we started early again. Plus, it's impossible to sleep once the sun even just peaks above the canyon walls.
It is day 4, our last day in the canyon. We're hiking out today, and it's really hot this morning. It was already hot at like 7, and we just filled up at our last water until the rim. So we dunked our sun hoodies, and now we're starting our way up.
After a few miles, we could see the South Kaibab trail in the distance.
I think you can see where we have to go up in the distance there.
It was a total tease as we climbed up and down steep, eroded, hard-to-follow trail toward its obviously maintained and nicely switchbacked counterpart. After what felt like ages, we turned a corner to a shaded hut, a stark indicator that we were now, finally, in day hiking territory. The trail changed immediately to a wide and well-worn path. Now, the challenge was the incline. With 4.4 miles and nearly 5,000 feet of climbing ahead of us, we started our long climb out of the canyon. At first, we were energized by the impeccable trail maintenance, but it didn't take long before we were seeking a break in the very little amount of shade along the trail. The canyon seemed to expand as we climbed, the views becoming more impressive with each switchback, and there were lots of switchbacks. Passing day hikers gave me a strange motivation to press on, and I began to feel like a well-oiled machine, despite a hard few days in the canyon. The closer we got to the South Kaibab trailhead, the more crowded it became, and we chatted with several people about our time below the rim. Just before reaching the top, clouds rolled in over the canyon, giving it a completely different feel than it has in full sun. And before I knew it, we were done.
We did it!
That was brutal.
That was. We just finished the South Kaibab Trail after leaving from the Tonto Trail this morning. We did almost 16 miles and we're done by 4 p.m. and we're gonna catch the shuttle. Let's go.
We ran to catch the shuttle with hopes of a hot meal and a shower in our near future. We had elk burgers and beers while listening to live music before retrieving my car from Lipan Point, which we reached right at sunset. I reflected on another rewarding and challenging backpacking trip. A full dinner was sufficient in shifting my thoughts once again from why do I do the things that I do to what will I do next.